Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, our great subscribers and our newcomers. Welcome back to English streams, and I hope you can both hear me and see the screen well. If not, please let us know in the comments. We're going to wait several minutes for, waiting the rest of the people who wanted to join the stream live, and then we will start. I see some comments there. So Alex and Almas, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure. I would be glad to share some of the information and hear from you back, maybe with some interesting questions and cases. I believe we shall wait for one more minute and then can start. The topic today is estimates in IT, and before making this presentation, I estimated it myself at the very beginning. Once I was asked to conduct the stream, and of course, then I found out right now that my estimates were not as close as I wish them to be, but still I was able to, I would say, set some boundaries which I actually aimed at and was more or less correct. So, but this is not a usual case, I believe, or at least this is the case for such a small project such as preparing for the stream. However, in bigger projects, we often tend to either overestimate or underestimate, and that brings a lot of troubles or problems or issues or distrust to the industry. And I would like to share some of the thoughts, some of the knowledge with you so that we can bring it lower, which is quite important because we all make estimates. Before I begin the actual presentation, I would like to make several disclaimers, right? It's important to mention and to note that the ideas that I would talk about inside this presentation are not mine. So I didn't invent like 95% of what I'm going to talk about, right? However, the experience and experiencing those ideas is mine. So I will not talk about anything I didn't really experience up to this time, and I would not talk about things that didn't help me. Some of them were helping me a lot for a long time. Some of them helped me just today or like yesterday, but still I wanted to share them with you pretty much with a lot of confidence. And yeah, this stream was really intended not only for the developers that estimate almost on a daily basis, right? Usually managers ask developers to estimate features, tasks, stories, epics, you know, but also I would like this stream to be useful for the managers themselves that often experience a lot of troubles, a lot of issues with estimating, and managers give estimations to, well, in IT, they usually give it to business, right? The business owners, the customers that are eager to know when things are going to be done. I would like this stream to be also helpful for this audience, for customers, for business, to serve as somewhat educational tool for them, for you, if you see that, that can help you dealing with IT teams, IT business in general. So let's start. Why would we estimate? And of course, business estimates to plan a budget, maybe to make something to a certain date, right? You want to build a product to present it on a certain conference, and you estimate if you would make it or not because the conference is important. You may think that the managers may estimate to evaluate the risks and, for example, choose a team properly, right? The team composition. Maybe they plan a load or are involved in the hiring process. Sometimes business estimate to beat the competition, right? You know the competitor is going to be on the market within a year. So within a year, you are looking for a product that going to be first one. And there are millions of other reasons why we estimate. We want to predict the future, and usually none of us has either witches or wizards in our genealogy trees that can predict the future. So we are not quite successful about it often. Based on the different reasons of the estimations, I would like to make one important point here, that you, as a person who asks about the estimates, should always communicate the goal when you request the estimate and give important details and context about that particular request. Because very often, either business or managers or developers themselves are asking the estimates, but they hide the true goal behind it and the true motivations to get the estimates. And starting from there, everything goes wrong, because the people who make estimates for them, not knowing the actual goal, can really screw up the estimations. Why the estimates actually can become a problem? Well, recently I've watched a tech talk by Robert Martin, and he emphasized that item a lot. Wrong estimates breeds distrust, right? When you ask someone to estimate, and they, let's say, gave you an estimate for 2 weeks, but it's the 5th week already, and the project is still not complete, of course, it breeds distrust. So, and the more you go further, the more distrust you have, right? an estimate becomes a commitment when it was not supposed to be, is the other problem, which is really common within IT industry. So you say, okay, the feature would take, let's say, 2 hours, right? Or maybe a day, or maybe a week. And after a week passes by, a manager comes in, he asks, why the feature is still not complete? Well, something went wrong, something was not complete yet by the other team members and so on. And he or she is raging because they thought that you gave a commitment instead of the estimate, and they, yelling at you saying, but you said it would be done in 1 week, and you have no idea, you didn't say that, you estimated. So it is a problem. Well, the other problem is that you are never 100% sure about your estimates. In reality, it might be either more or less. And it's a good question. It's a good question when you can be 100% sure about an estimate. We can talk about it later, but think about it yourself right now, and maybe we can compare our answers when we will have questions. It's a funny meme here when the management asks for an estimate and then treat them as deadlines. That is what usually happens, and that is why a lot of tension it created. Well, what else, right? The accurate estimation is very expensive, and in reality, it doesn't really worth it. So when, let's say, you estimate a huge project or maybe even a medium-sized project, the very rough estimate that you can receive is, a development team breaks this project into big pieces and estimate by their previous experience roughly how much it would take, multiply that by 6, let's say, and give you the estimate. Of course, you would like this estimate to be very well improved, right? Because you need to know the exact date or at least some period of time. But improving that takes a lot of time and effort, money, nerves, and so on. So it's quite expensive. Well, there is also, of course, a responsibility issue, usually between a manager or a developer or a business itself, that brings tension. You ask for an estimate, and then the developer gives that estimate, but maybe does not commit to that. So if you accept that estimate, you're responsible for the result. If you don't accept the estimate, there is a tension. This is also related to business versus management and so on, right? So it's quite a heavy responsibility, and no one wants to burden that. Yeah, and usually estimates contains a lot of assumptions. We may require an estimate, we may ask for the estimate, but when asking, we assume that the person have enough time, enough sleep, enough health, and many other factors that we assume will be going good. That's also problematic. There is a saying that everything in IT takes 3 times longer to complete, even if you already considered that. So you know about that, you consider that, and it would still take 3 times longer, which is funny, but actually it's true. Well, after my research about estimations, after I watched a lot of talks about that, to me, that was really clear that the estimate has certain attributes. And this idea was actually taken, right? Stolen maybe from Robert Martin's speech as well. So he talks about the honesty. So the estimate should be honest. And the most honest answer to the question, how much it would take, is I don't know, of course. So you don't know, never you know exactly how much it would take. But then, you know, the honesty component here, it also means that you would communicate honestly whether it would take, you know, a certain amount of dates that are feasible, of course. So, but it should be honest. You should not play to please someone, or because you are afraid to name the numbers, you would say them differently. So it should be honest always. The estimate should be accurate, right? Accuracy is also an interesting component, because when you say, let's say, a feature takes from something from now till, you know, the end of the times, the end of the universe, whatever, it is accurate. It would take somewhere there, but it still doesn't help anyone, right? So accuracy is a very relative component, and that is why, you know, you would better give some feasible ranges, but these should always be ranges, not a deadline, right? Because estimate is not a deadline. The estimate also should be precise. Well, and if we say a certain date on a certain month in a certain hour, it's very precise, right? So it's one single point across the timeline. In fact, it is not an estimate. So the precision is referred to these ranges, right? So the bigger the range, the less is the precision. The smaller the range, the better is the precision. So all these three components together makes up a good estimate. And a good estimate doesn't breed distrust. So I'm asking you to estimate something, and then you give me the estimate that is honest, accurate, and precise. Maybe not 100%, but still, it may make me mad. But in fact, after a while, I would of course accept the realities and continue working with that. Instead of, you know, dreaming about some unrealistic things and expecting some unrealistic deliverables, and then, you know, facing the reality, right? And yes, they say that the cost of improving the initial estimations done by YBS, it's a work breakdown structure. When you decompose it, your initial huge project into chunks, right? Multiplied by 6, grows exponentially, while the benefits from doing that grows logarithmically. So it means that you know, the difficulty grows very high, but the benefits grow really like small and steady. And that is why the advice to any business would be to stop chasing really high accuracy and precise estimates, and work with something that is feasible, honest, and but still has you know, a chance of failure. So one thing I want to really bring to your attention is the difference between the estimate and commitment. You should know that estimate is always about uncertainty. It's always about ranges and probabilities. So these are, you know, a range of dates, a period that something would be done, right? The commitment, on the other hand, it's all about responsibility, deadlines, and certainty. So when someone makes a commitment, the person should commit, right? The person should do it as committed, like 100% sure. And which is why it often occurs to be a problem, because you expect commitments, but the other people give you the estimates. You should never mix them up, and you should always ask a question whether you hear an estimate or a commitment, whether the team is committed or just making an estimate to provide you with some facts about the project to then later make a decision, right? And yes, developers' job is not to make you happy. The developer job is to provide some facts that you can base your decision on. Here is the cone of uncertainty, which I've met quite recently. However, it already helped me to make some decisions, right? The cone of uncertainty is about the time when you make promises, and the estimates, right? The variability, the certainty of the estimates with regard to the time as the project evolves. So basically, the cone says that if a project is just at the very beginning of its state, do not make any promises there, just because any estimate made at that period can vary up to 4x from one direction to the other. But closer to as it evolves, you can make some promises in the middle, so that they better match the actual situation. What usually happens in reality is the opposite. Usually business comes, asks for the estimations. We as developers or as IT consulting companies make them. They are treated as promises, and they are dead wrong, right? They are very far from reality. And then closer to the middle, we start to understand how wrong were the estimations, but that doesn't save us, right? That doesn't save us, and that doesn't save the business as well. So the underestimated project costs more, of course, and it's all about funds, it's all about trust, and so on. So please consider that cone and refer to that when making estimates and commitments, especially the second ones. So estimating goes better with scenarios. And one of the best practices to make an estimate is to make several scenarios, right? Optimistic, pessimistic, and realistic. Of course, the optimistic scenarios assumes that everything would go good. And the chances to screw up this estimation is like 95%. So it is almost never to be the accurate estimation. So everything goes good, right? So the developer team is always healthy. There is no traffic jams. Coffee is always ready on the table. There is no disease. There is no arguments in the families, and so on. So the perfect world that exists there, and everything is prepared and everything works well. The pessimistic, on the other hand, consider that everything is quite bad. So like everything is like in hell. And the chances to screw up the pessimistic estimations is only 5%. Very realistically, this is something in the middle, right? We consider realistic scenario to be like either or question. So it's like 15% to screw up these types of estimations. But these are honest, right? So these are quite honest estimations, and you can rely on them in your thinking, in your planning, and you can rely on them in your decision making. However, you should always remember about the assumptions that we make. So that is why when asking for an estimations and then receiving the answers, please, as a business or as a manager, as a developer, consider asking questions about the assumptions. Does it mean that we would deploy that? Doesn't mean that this feature includes that functionality and this functionality instead of that functionality, and so on. So assumptions and clarifying the assumptions is quite important, to quite important risk, and you should mitigate it as much as you can. This is one of the example of how you can formulate things, right? So feature X would take us from 5 to 25 days, depending on different factors such as integrations with some definite service, the availability of our decision makers. Maybe there is a vacation, upcoming vacations of decision makers, and they can stuck the process. And if the developer's mom feels okay, because we have one developer, and if his mom is not feeling okay, he's out of the good development process, right? So it depends on many factors. And we can ship it closer to, for example, the 5th of February in the worst case. So of course, this is still not a commitment, but you should clarify, right? So if it is a commitment, then expect it to be closer, but not earlier. So a lot of the teams, especially agile teams, make estimations in stuff, right? Stuff like t-shirts, planets, story points, bottle sizes, I don't know, any stuff, right? Any stuff. Right? So that's actually very helpful. I mean, it doesn't give you a lot of the detailed numbers, for example, financial numbers or even time. However, it gives you the comparison. And we as humans are very good at comparing things. We know what is larger, what is smaller, and based on that, you can receive the estimations in such units, but then convert it to your own units by yourself, because you would understand, okay, this feature would be quite larger than that feature, and comparing to that, it would take 3 times longer, right? And if that feature took us, let's say, a week, that would be 3 weeks or even months, and so on, right? So you can plan accordingly. And one of the other advantages of that method is that you can always refine it well and see whether the actual estimations, for example, these units match what happens in reality. And after each milestone or sprint or months of work, you can actually adjust your understanding of how big and small items are, and then ask the team to better estimate that. So that improves accuracy and that improves the precision. However, it takes some time to calibrate. So after you have made the estimations, it's quite important not to sit back and watch them, brewing, right? Watch them burn. So it's quite important not to rely on them much, but what is important is to keep refining the estimations as long as the project or a feature implementation goes. So this is very important, because as soon as you estimate it, you start developing it, and then you would understand that something goes wrong, right? Either an integration takes more time, or someone got sick with COVID and leaves the team, for example, or there is a new series on Netflix and someone is feeling asleep all the time, so that also decreases the chances to be really precise and accurate regarding the initial estimation, right? To match it. And yeah, so the closer a project or a feature to its end, the more accurate is an estimate. So you can see how it happens. So if you estimated for 3 weeks, on the second week, you already know that maybe it would take not 3 weeks, but like less, maybe 2 weeks, or like more, like 4 weeks, because you see that updates and you see how to adjust, right? So it's always about adjusting, and do not blame people, right? Because people who made an estimations, you know, there is no human on earth that can predict something with 100% accuracy and precision. That is why a lot of things happen, and we cannot really predict much of it. So it's always about uncertainty. So we should monitor the initial estimates, and the expectations should be changed accordingly. So you as a manager or as a business or maybe as a developer asking for the estimations from another developer, you should not sit back and ask why you told me this is going to be XYZ period, but now it's like quite longer. Monitoring and adjusting your decisions is quite important here to make better decisions in the future. And you can, after you've done some work, you can see the statistics and improve the estimations. So this is some actions that you should take after you estimated and started the project. Before we go to the conclusions, I would like to bring our attention back to the question, when can we know for sure how much the feature or a project might take? So I would love to hear your responses, but the actual answer to that, and it's not, again, it's not my answer, it's like many people, many prominent developers and IT experts find that answer to be suitable, right? It's the actual time you complete, the actual time you complete the task or a project and so on, right? So when something is done, when something is complete, only then you can say how much time did it take to do that. And of course, there is a tendency to think that if you have already completed the same task once, or maybe twice or 3 times, you will spend approximately the same number of hours, or maybe exactly the same number of hours completing the next one, which is similar or the exact same. It's not. In fact, maybe the other developer would do that and he or she doesn't know what you know. Maybe if you would do that, some traffic jams would prevent you from making it on time, or like a TV series or whatever, right? So that is why this is to keep in mind when making a promise or estimating something. As for the conclusions from this talk and what I wish everyone can remember and further rely on, I choose the following items. So first of all, for the business, I do believe that estimating a project at the idea stage is very uncertain. So if you think, and maybe the developers gave you the estimations as 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, multiply by at least 3, right? Because you don't know how things would turn to be. And the less descriptive your technical requirements are, the less accurate and precise would be the estimation. However, the more immature your project is, the less imprecise and the accurate will be the estimations. However, you can communicate with the estimation team and provide them as much context as possible so that they would understand what you're asking from them and what is the purpose of you asking them this. So when, let's say, you say, guys, these are quite high estimations. I cannot accept them, right? They would question you why, and it turns out that you have some deadline that your, let's say, shareholders gave you, and you are rushing to that deadlines because maybe there is a very important conference or a different event. Maybe some competitors are entering the market, and this is quite important to deliver to the estimating team because then you will receive the honest answer. Business should know and understand the difference between the estimate and the commitment and clarify if needed. And I repeat that once again because it's quite important and it brings a lot of transparency to speaking with the IT team, and everyone would be smiling instead of crying after everything is clear regarding whether it's an estimate or commitment. And of course, refine the estimates as you go. So never stop thinking about your estimates and do the analytical work. You should understand that sometimes you change the decision, right? You change feature A to feature B and so on. Sometimes your partners screw up. Sometimes your partners do better, right? And you may overestimate, right? So the project takes longer. And if that would take less time, it also can be problematic. The conclusion for the managers can be as follows. Still keep insisting that estimates are not commitments. You should always understand the difference and ask the developers whether they commit to the estimates that they provided or they don't commit, and then you should know and bear that in mind. You should always communicate honest estimate that is a range of dates, so it's never a deadline. So don't say we would do that till next Thursday, 9 a.m. your time. So please provide some deadlines and ranges that evaporates distrust and at the same time gives you the flexibility to manage things rather than rushing after the team members, chasing them, blaming them for not committing, for not working properly, and so on. Be ready to get the negative feedback as well. So it is okay to receive negative feedback. When giving the estimate is usually high, higher than it's expected, higher than it's wished to be, right? Be ready to get negative feedback. It's not about you, right? So it's not that you are bad because you provided such a, let's say, long estimates, right? Such maybe inaccurate estimate. It's not about you being bad. It's the fact that management or business should consider, and it's okay. Yes, listen to their range, listen to their emotions, see that, and say it once again, the project take a year, so not less. And that's quite important. And then they would believe you and make the decisions accordingly. And yeah, the group estimates are generally more accurate than the individual ones. So estimating something in group may take longer, right? It may require a lot more resources, but at the same time, it brings accuracy and precision to the estimates as well, because the other team members can possess some of the context that you or the person who makes an estimate doesn't. So it helps. Giving scenarios is a good practice. So optimistic, pessimistic, realistic scenarios is a good practice to do, and it will help you to avoid distrust. You should also, as business and managers, you should also reflect the changes in the initial scope or requirements in the estimates. So never leave them as they are, and communicate those changes to the, let's say, customers or to developers themselves. Work with assumptions carefully, because it's better ask than to screw it up later, right? It's better ask whether, well, let's say a task is considered to be done when it's deployed to production, or you just will write a code for that, right? It's better ask than to assume. And remember about the Parkinson's law. So something takes almost exactly the time allocated to that. So a certain task might take a year or a day, and students know that, by the way, right? So when you as a student write your senior thesis, you make it at the end of the year, not at the middle or the beginning, right? At the last day. And yeah, there is a nice saying: when you assume, you make an ass of you and me. Always remember about that, and be careful with assumptions, because they can make you crazy sometimes. The conclusions for developers are as follows. Estimates are not commitments. Remember that. Please communicate that. And your job is to provide facts and not please others. So when you are making an estimate, do not look at your manager, who is always angry, or who sometimes is angry, or who gets angry and mad at you because you provided some bad estimates as he speaks. No, it is a fact, and it should be done that way. So even in confrontation, and the managers usually find truth in the confrontation. So they try to scare you, right? To make you mad, to make you upset, to find out whether it is really so or not. So even in confrontation, be honest. So if something takes a week, it should be a week, not 2 days. Clarify the assumptions, and question things you don't know. So you don't know why you're being asked about estimates, clarify that. You don't know whether the integration with the other service is needed or not, clarify that. So clarify things that you do not know. That will help you avoid distrust. That will help you gain respect from your managers, your colleagues, and well, your beloved ones, at least. And that's it from me. Of course, that is not all. There is quite a long range of things we could talk about regarding the estimates. For example, there is even a no estimate movement, and you can check that out in Twitter or in whatever platform, that claims that estimates should not be even done, right? So it's very interesting. You can look it up. But yeah, so in the course of 14 minutes, I tried my best to kind of come up with some good advices for both business developers and managers to make better estimations. And now it's time to see the questions, if they exist, and answer them. Now, Mas is quite active, commenting when DMs swears on blood. Yeah. Yeah, when DM swears on blood regarding the project taking 4 months and then it's actually 2 years, it's interesting. Yeah, so I will wait for several minutes. Maybe there are some questions. If there will be no questions within this live streaming, of course we save the stream, we record that, and we would then publish that on YouTube. You can leave your questions in comments, and we definitely will look into them and we'll try to answer them as much as we can. I believe we would also upload the presentation there so that you can have a reference. Maybe you can use that to recall some of the moments from my presentation and work with it. I had some quite important and interesting books to mention, but unfortunately I don't see that slide. Maybe it's I accidentally removed that. So there are quite a few very useful books written that are related to estimations. So Steve McConnell, who is a co-author of the Clean Coder by Uncle Bob, he wrote a whole book related to estimating IT projects. I didn't read it whole. Maybe I should have, but I still advise you to have a look at it if you want to be better at estimations. Uncle Bob, Robert Martin himself, mentions the subject of estimations in his very well-known book, Clean Coder. But also he wrote a separate book about estimations. I believe it's called Agile Estimations. Yeah, and please check this out. The hashtag #NoEstimations or no estimate in Twitter or in other sources. It's quite interesting idea. So I have a question from Almas. Why should we do estimation at all? What problem are we solving by it? Well, thank you for the question, Almas. It's a quite important question. I would like to, of course, ask the question about your question. So, for example, we, right? So we as whom, as business, as managers. But in general, it helps us to get the understanding of current and future reality, right? Because we cannot make proper decisions living in total uncertainty. So total uncertainty brings, I would say, brings a lot of fear and then disturbs our decisions. And of course, this estimates can help us make better decisions with regard to different things, right? Whether we are business that makes the decision to either invest in a certain project or not, whether the business, for example, thinks that certain project would take like 2 months and then they allocate a certain budget to that, and it turns out that the project, being honestly estimated, would take a year, right? So it would be a totally different budget. The managers, when planning sprint, or for example, planning something, some team activities, can also ask for estimations because they possess some definite knowledge about the reality, right? They are in, so they might know that some developers would leave in a 2 months period. So they are asking about estimations to kind of better understand the reality and to make proper decisions regarding whether they should talk to those developers to prevent them from leaving or adjust the schedule or the budget. So I hope I have answered your question, Almas, and if not, please give me the feedback so I can maybe answer it better. And definitely, I mean, when you as a business or a manager asks, when you ask for an estimation and you say, okay, you have 3 weeks to finish the task, it's clear. Yeah, it's clear that in order to do certain tasks earlier, or maybe better with much clean code, you should give up something, right? So for example, you should put more financial resources, or you should put more engineers in the project. You should put better engineers at the project. And estimations help us to communicate that to each other, right? So that is why we need estimations. But maybe we don't. So look at no estimation hashtag. Maybe we don't. Maybe we can clearly see it without any estimating. Yeah, Almas, thank you for sharing. That estimate is not a commitment. It was insightful. Yeah, it was insightful for me as well, Almas. When talking with you about that, it was quite insightful. That, I mean, it is obvious, but at the same time, it's still insightful because you, or at least me, I ask myself always when I give an estimate, is it an estimate or commitment? And I tell the person whom I give the estimates that it's not a commitment yet, because I cannot guarantee you that, right? So I need more facts, I need more work done. I need to start this project to kind of commit later when I have something, at least something to work with, right? So it's quite insightful, and it solves a lot of problems, and it brings trust when estimating things. So another question from Almas: what should developers do when DM commit for teams and they either DM tries to push developers to follow that unrealistic commitments? The developers should deny pushing. The developers should hold to their realistic facts and do not make any commitments, because as I told in the presentation before, right, managers, well, DMs, delivery managers, they tend to scare you, right, because they like to deal with people, and developers like to deal with computers. So computers do not become mad at you, right? They fail sometimes, right? They switch off, but they are not getting mad at you. So when DM committed or has committed to certain things, and the team sees that it was really unrealistic, it should be, first of all, it should be communicated. Second of all, the best course of action should be developed, right? Either we bring more people, or we remove certain requirements, or something must be changed, something must be replaced or added to the evaluation to make it equal, right? So there is never a way out just to stick to that commitment and say, yes, everything is fine. And there is a famous meme about it when a dog is sitting in the center of the building that is on fire and says, everything is fine, and drinks tea. So never commit to that, and communicate it clearly. And if the manager or DM pushes you, do not give up. If you see that the manager is out of his mind, just communicate it to the upper manager. Yeah, that's something should be done, right? Because if something is unrealistic, it cannot become realistic if you commit to that. Okay, it was the last question from Almaz. I believe we are over with this presentation. Yeah, I believe we are over with this presentation. So as I already said, please, if you watch it already recorded, and please feel free to leave your questions in the comments. Subscribe to us, hit the bell, as they say, and do not commit to wrong estimations. Have a good rest of the day, all that were live today with me, and hope to see you again. It's very interesting to conduct streams like this.